同志们，我们未来的，我们是中国现在 China Now, with your gang of two, Nansu, who is a senior investigative reporter for Epoch Times, and yours truly, Michael Olson, who long ago was dissuaded from being a China hand by the great helmsman himself, Mao Zedong. Well, Nansu, the Chinese Communist Party, is trying its best to get its people to spend some money, but they don't have any money to spend. And if they do have any money to spend, they're saving the money they have to spend so that they can spend it later if they need it. So the Chinese domestic economy is just not going anywhere. And try as they might, they can't seem to be able to get things going. So there's a article published by Q which is the CCP's official theoretical journal, that argued that consumption is the ultimate demand and plays a fundamental role in economic development. Well, yeah, if you're not buying anything and consuming it, it doesn't get sold and it doesn't move. The money doesn't move. So it's an unusually prominent discussion reflecting a growing official concern that weak domestic demand has become a major obstacle to economic recovery amid a prolonged slowdown. The article called for measures to expand employment, raise disposable incomes, improve the social welfare system, develop new areas of consumer spending, including tourism, healthcare, elder care, and child care services. It also urged the regime to stabilize the property market and maintain healthy capital markets, warning that falling asset prices could further damage consumer confidence. And this is all as if the Chinese Communist Party can actually figure out how to do all of this stuff. And so that takes me, at least, back to the Mao's Great Leap Forward, because back then they were in a similar economic tough time, and Mao came up with a way to make a great leap forward. And in many respects, it seems over the past 5, 6 years, Xi Jinping has been trying to emulate Mao's great leap forward by focusing his economy on a few very specific industries that he could come to dominate and make a lot of money doing it, selling stuff to the world. But in doing that, his domestic economy ran amok and is now collapsing to the extent that nobody has any money to buy things. And furthermore, people don't have enough money to have babies because they can't afford the apartment rents, place to live. So the young people of China are adopting this lying flat attitude where we're not going to get a job. I'm not going to go to school. I'm not going to have any babies. I'm not going to do this. And so it just calls me back to Mao's efforts to totally dominate an economy as he did during the Great Leap Forward. And so I thought it would be interesting to go back to those times, if you're so willing with me, and discuss what happened. We're talking about the mid 1950s. And it
Okay,
wasn't that
yeah.
long.
There is an article this week published by Xinhua news agent. They're actually not talking about the Great Leap Forward. They
Ah,
actually talk about the mid 1950s. That's prior to Leap Forward, and they trying to promote the era that's prior to Great Leap Forward. Um, you
oh,
know,
and it was a time in which the young CCP government was realizing some gains. Uh, they've did some land reform. They conquered inflation. And they were had some moderate success in industrialization. So the early 1950s was a period of that they would hold up, say, look, this is what we did then.
Well, first of all, that's a mistake. I think that conclusion is a big lie. Um, Now, what happened in the mid 1950s? So, see, the communist, it was the time they called socialist reform, when that they basically grab all the private industries. They basically take their assets away. All the capitalist markets are gone. Those because those so-called economic growth is not was not actually created by the regime, but however, it was created because they take over all the private industries. They basically destroy all the capitalists, the private owners, the private ownership, right? So, but it's dangerous. If you look at China today's situation, they actually start talking about those era. The you know Now the communist regime took over China in 1949. Between 1949 and 1952, uh, immediately, well, first of all, they do the land reform. They basically kill all the landlords, and then they gave them they gave the land to the farmers. So that's
Yeah.
how they gained the support from the farmers, right? And then from 1952 to 1950, from 1953 to
So
19,
this is something that we hear talked about in places like New York City now. What we're going to do is we're going to take all the money from the rich people
yeah,
and give
yeah,
it to the poor people.
that's right. Yeah, that's
That's
between
exactly what they
1953,
did in China.
yeah, in 1953 and 1956. Now, in the countryside, they take the land ownership back from the farmers. And then in the
Well,
cities,
wait a minute, wait a minute. Well, this is a very, very important part. They took the land away from the landlords and gave it to the farmers.
between 49 and 52. And
And so
then
the farmers were happy
you're happy, yeah, but
because they
then
now own the land that they once were peasants on. Now they owned it. Then what happened?
in between 1952 to 1956, they say, oh, you guys need to group together. They didn't say they will take the land by the government. They say all your guys will group together, make a agricultural production unit, and then the land will belong to your whole unit. So it's uh, uh, so
Communalizing the land.
right. So and then that has been that way ever since. So basically, you lost your own ownership of the land. You gave your land to your village or to
Your production unit.
your production unit. That's in the countryside. In the city, so they basically first of all they do two things. Now for the small business like a mom and pop's restaurant and shop, or if you have like a mechanic shop that's doing the doing the repair, or you have like a barber shop, those things. So they change those private ownership to to a unit own. Basically, you form a unit in your maybe in your community, in your street block, that kind of thing. So it kind of like between private owned and the government owned. But basically it's not owned by a person anymore, but it's owned by a unit. And the unit it's been put all the units have been put under the leadership of Chinese Communist Party. But however, for this is only for the small business. Now, for the big business, for the big business, the government just came strictly to you and tell you you gave away your ownership. So they what they well for the a lot of big so they started by saying, okay, the ownership will become a mixed ownership, a government and or
And
private
private.
ownership that each owns a certain percentage.
We'll
But
be partners.
they're partners, but then they will give you 5% each year. And then 20 years you don't own anything anymore. So in 20 years you are phasing out basically. That's what happened. So that's how the private ownership disappeared by the
They made a deal.
yeah, it's a deal. It's not a deal because you have to, because you don't
You didn't
sign
have
that
any
they say,
choice, right?
yeah, you don't have any choice but say yes, right?
So here's the deal. You just say yes
Yeah.
or die. One of the two.
Well, you don't say yes. They will. You don't know what's going to happen
Yeah,
to you,
right,
right?
right.
So, pretty much everybody say yes. So by 3 years from 1953 to 1956, they basically transferred the whole country, all the uh, all the factories, all the small business. They are not no longer privately owned.
And
You
what happened when they took the people out of the business?
well, a lot of people die, commit suicide, or because basically they can't make a decision for their own business anymore. They're not the boss anymore. The government's the boss, or or
What
the
happened to the productivity?
it doesn't matter at that time.
Okay.
The Chinese government, they do whatever they want to do. The productivity, they don't care about the productivity. They only care about wiping out all the price. See, the communism and capitalism, they don't get along.
They
That's
don't
why
get
it is.
along, do they?
No, now it's interesting. It's interesting why they start talking about that right now. They talking about that as a big success uh, of uh, of uh, of CCP, of the communist China. They really, the article came out last week. They really using Xi Jinping's own word to praise that period of history. Now think about that. Right now in China, there is a lot of private business going on, right? Uh, so now, are they going to go back to that period of time and do that kind of thing?
Because that's what Xi Jinping wants to do,
Yeah, he
is
already
go back to
started.
Mao.
Yeah, he already started,
Yeah.
ever since 2016, the so-called mixed reform, right? So he already started, but now maybe they are going to push to a lot greater extent for that kind of you know they call it, once they call it reform, the communist government coming to you, they say they're going to do some reform. You
Well,
better.
after this period, um, things started slowing down because Mao started picking up his activity and he started engineering a great leap forward because he was dissatisfied with the progress being made for a number of different reasons. He didn't like the slowness of the Soviet way of slowly developing your industries. He wanted to move quicker. And he had some initial successes in the period in which you spoke. He also had a tremendous debt at the time for his involvement in the Korean War. So owed a lot of money to Russia. And he got to thinking maybe we don't have enough money to make a great leap forward in an industry by building things and whatnot. But maybe what we can do is employ our 600 million people and really make a great leap forward if we can figure out how to mobilize 600 million people. And those are the conditions that kind of set the stage for this great leap forward.
Yeah, we don't know what the next step will be in today's China, but they are actually the Xinhua news agent and other media, they really start pushing talking about and also appraise the time period in the 50s, how they actually the government take over all the private ownership and wipe out the private ownership. Now keep in mind, in 1978, Deng Xiaoping started the so-called reform, right? To allow people have private ownership. But however, Deng Xiaoping uh, all the private ownership were allowed based on a basic theory. They say, which is this is what invented by the Deng Xiaoping. He basically say China's socialism is in a very fundamental elementary stage. In the elementary stage of socialism, the private ownership is allowed, so that private the capitalist the market economy can help. And now it really depends. So, which, leave a door open for the successors of Deng Xiaoping. Basically, you can say, well, whenever you feel it's time is correct, you can claim, oh, we already passed, or we already complete the elementary
Yeah.
stage of socialism. So now we are going to get rid of all the private ownership. So so now think about this. It's now the time? This is the
Ah,
people start asking, right? Because now China is the second largest economy in the world. Xi Jinping is doing all the rejuvenization, and is it the time, that China already passed the elementary stage of socialism? If yes, then is it the time they're going to do things that everything they did in the mid 50s to wipe out all the private ownership? Uh, are
and
they
then
going to
and
do that
then
again?
yes, and will will what happened in the late 50s happen to us if we do go back to Mao's way? Because Mao's way was taking total control and total direction of the economy, which is what they would like to
It's a
do to
central plan economy, right?
Central Pan, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so I don't think they're going to do the great leap forward again, because they don't I think they smart enough to know that's just not going to that's not going to be good. But I think they probably go back to the time period that's prior to the great leap forward. So which
okay,
is also very bad because they basically
they set the stage for what would come later.
well, they will basically wipe out all the market economy. They
Okay,
will take over all the private ownership, and going.
isn't that what they did with the Ant Group?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's the certain groups they did in the past, like to Alibaba, to Ant Group. They're going to do it if they actually going back to Ant Group. They just prevent Ant Group from going public,
Public, yeah.
to sell their stocks, right? But however, if they're going to the mid 50s, there won't be any Ant Group, there won't be any Alibaba, there won't be any Tencent. Those company will be will have to become, government owned. They basically will make all those companies become government owned, stay owned high tech companies.
So to do that, you're going to have a very, very strong central government that's totally in control. Would take us back, Nansu, to Mao's 100 Flowers movement.
Well, Hundred Flowers movement is different. It's ideological part.
Yes, yes, it
Yeah,
is.
the Hundred Flower movement it's to ask you to say, oh, you're going to free to give out your opinion. This is called, everybody can freely express your opinion. That's why they say, oh, there's hundreds of different flowers
Sure,
blossom.
let's hear what you have to think.
Right, and
We want
then
to hear what you have to think.
yeah, yeah, and then they will, if you say something against the government, then the next step is that you find out you're behind the bars, right? But that's more of ideological approach of control China. That's not an economic part of it. The economic part of it in the mid 50s, from 1952 to
Mhm.
1956, the Great Leap Forward started from 1958. So, but prior to the Great Leap Forward, between 50, the beginning of 53 to the end of 56, that's 3 years. They basically, wipe out all the private ownership in China, make China.
And currently, the Xinhua news agency and other news agencies have been told to hold this era up so that
Yep,
people think about it in very favorable terms.
that's right.
It was a
That's
good
what
it
they're
was a
doing
good
right
time
now.
because we got rid of all of those capitalists and we took over their business and everything was going just right at that period of time, those three years. And as you said, they were going really good for the government and for the people because they took away all the money from anybody who had any money.
That's
They
right.
took away their businesses.
Yeah, well, I don't know how they're going to do it now, but it's interesting. But they're going to probably, usually, the first stage is when they prepare to do something, the communist regime prepare to do something, they first of all start, propaganda, as
Right.
so ideologically or conceptually, people say, oh yeah, this is good. Then they will testing the water, right? Uh, they'll start doing something. We
Well,
don't know
what the,
why they're doing that now, have all these propaganda machine coming out and hide to appraise the period of between 1953 and 56, but it's just very dangerous.
and what the CCP is doing right now is searching everybody's past. If you're an official, they're searching your past, looking for any form of disagreement because the 21st National Congress is coming up next year. Xi Jinping is running for his fourth term, going to be a Franklin Roosevelt, I guess, be a president for life. And he is looking for anybody who has anything negative to say about him. So this form of total control is really another form of the 100 flowers. So looking for somebody who had an adverse opinion and they're going to wipe you out. And it goes back for years.
Oh yeah, well, not just right now. What's happening in China is just not going back for years. For your opinion, uh, they are actually going back for years to sanction all the entities, regardless the government owned entities or especially the private entities, for taxation. So
Well, they're
basically.
looking for money, right?
Yeah, they're looking for money. And also the anti-corruptions goes way back, like
Right.
10 or 20 years. They're searching your record, and they're just out of
So
money.
this is really a period that's more like the latter stages of the 1950s when Mao started to make his move to the Great Leap Forward. This is
It's
what
prior to the Great Leap Forward. Okay, it's between 1953 and 56.
that was the good time.
Yeah, that's what
But
they start doing right now.
that's
That's what
okay.
they're trying to wipe out. If we still don't know. It's too early to tell why they have all of a sudden put out those propaganda appraising the period between 53
Mhm.
and 56. So, but if they do it, that's what if they actually do that kind of thing, then that means uh probably, we have a fifth plenary communist CCP meeting coming in a few months. All they need to do is take the Xi Jinping make a proposal, and the fifth plenary meeting they will pass a document say, oh, now we already complete the elementary stage of socialism. We are going to go to the maybe a middle range, or maybe a higher range of socialist society. Then we don't need a private business and anymore. So we will start making changes. We're making the government will make deal for a transition time of maybe 20 years. So like what they did in the 50s, 20 years, the all the private business will co-own by government and private and private owners, and then every year they will pay you 5% back, and 20 years later you're out of you're totally out. So all they need to do is just if they pass a document, that's it.
Yeah, but this reminds me of a bit of a magician who has you looking at what he's doing with one hand while he's doing something else with his other hand.
That's right.
And that's what I see them pointing to a nice period of time, the 53 to 56 period of time in which they took away all of the private businesses. The country got rich, taking away all of the private capital. Life was good. But that period of goodness led directly to the Great Leap Forward, which became the greatest catastrophe in the history of the universe when it gets right down to it. And it
Yep.
was because Mao took over and said, I have this great idea that we can take all of these 600 million people, none of which have a business anymore, and put them in the business of building a modern country. And that was to be the great leap forward.
Yep.
But it didn't quite work out as a great leap forward. It turned out to be a great leap backward. Now, what I see is the danger that Xi Jinping is leading the Chinese people down the same path that Chairman Mao led them in, into the great leap forward.
That's right.
I mean, Xi Jinping is getting rid of private businesses in favor of these giant industrial concerns that manufacture specific products that make a lot of money for the CCP, but no money for the people of China.
That's right. So we don't know what's going to happen next, but there is no people cannot vote. So basically, they decide whatever they want to do, right?
In the 50s, there was a very strict divide between people who lived in the country and people who lived in the city. People who lived in the country could not go into the city, and vice versa. So it was like people who lived in the country were prisoners of the countryside.
Yep.
And you did not have your own farm, so you had to farm on a communal farm. So you had to do the work, and you didn't get any of the benefit of your work.
Yeah. The people's commune, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the People's Commune started from 1958, actually, right after the. See, from 53 to 56, they basically say, they basically tell all the farmers, say, you guys put all your lands together, all the ownership will become the collectively owned, right? The land become collectively owned by the village or by your production unit, wherever. But it has, but it's not privately owned anymore. And then from the 1958, they start pushing out this idea of people's commute, right?
Right? And was this when the Hoku, the household registration came into being too?
I'm not following you.
Okay. I
So,
was,
but that the People's Commune was dissolved in 1984
mhm.
on the Deng Xiaoping. So the whole concept was gone, and then there are still a few People's Commune exist in China, um, but we don't know what's going to happen next, right? There
Well, we
that
don't because we don't know. And the point of this discussion is what happens when a central authority, a central government, a centralized economy doesn't really know what's going to happen. But
well.
if it has enough power to say this is what we're going to do and you're going to have to live with it, then that's
That's
what
right.
happens.
That's right. And then there have in the last couple of years there have been rumors that Xi Jinping want to industrialize the agriculture. So
Yes.
um, and I think that's that will it's a great advantage for the communist regime once they industrialize the
Control
agriculture. Yeah, to control. It's much easier to control a worker than control
a farmer,
a farmer. Yeah, because the farmer didn't have much, doesn't have much, but he had a small piece of land. Then he had quite a bit of independence.
freedom.
Right,
You know,
independence. That's a freedom, right? You got like 700 million people as a farmers. Everybody has a little bit of freedom. That all together, it's a huge challenge to the control of the communist regime. But once they make that 700 million people all become a worker of agriculture industry,
then
then
you're just a
everybody,
worker,
yeah,
like a
yeah,
factory worker. Correct.
that's right.
It's really difficult to find a farmer that's a socialist. I mean, it is.
Well, that's what they're doing,
Well,
in
that's what's in industrializing agriculture. You're taking essentially you're taking people away from the land and putting equipment and chemicals in the place of the farmer on a grand scale. So the farmer becomes a farm laborer on the
yeah,
industrialized farm, and you're
that's
just
it.
working for wages then.
That's it. Well, then your medical insurance depend on the government.
Yeah.
Your children's education depend on the government. Your benefit, medical insurance, everything, right? So it's a lot easier for them to control a worker, uh, who is providing labor to a government business than controlling a farmer who had a little freedom of to farm in a small piece of land.
No,
So
that's
I think that I don't know when it's going to happen, but they have been talking about for several years now.
well, let's talk about what happened when Mao took everybody off their farms and put them into these industrial farm settings, these giant communes. And he suddenly got the idea that that he could turn every one of these farms into a manufacturer of steel. And so they set up farm kilns on all of these farms and had them melt down whatever steel they had to make steel. And in the process of doing that, of making steel, they deforested the land. And they were just doing what they were told to do. They were told they could make steel by melting down their pots and pans in these backyard kilns. And the steel that they made was such inferior quality, couldn't use it for anything, but they made the steel. And that's what they were directed to do by the central authority as personified by Mao Zedong himself.
Yeah, that's the great. That's what the Great Leap Forward was, right?
That was part of it, and he was the one that was directing the economy. He was the sole provider of the economy. And another thing that happened during this time, not only did the people deforest the land, chop up all the trees and burn them in their kilns, but a great plague of locusts came upon the land and ate up everything that was edible. And so Mao came up with a four pests campaign. Remember that?
Yeah, yeah,
Smashing the Sparrows campaign.
yeah, yeah.
So he directed all the 600 million people to go out and smash the sparrows because they're eating the grain. And
Yep.
the people went out and they smashed billions of sparrows and they killed all the sparrows and then
And
the
then the
locusts came.
insects coming,
Yeah,
right?
and then the locusts came. So I guess the point I'm fishing for here, Nansu, is that Xi Jinping has been a great admirer of Mao Zedong. And I, for one, can't figure out why he would be a great admirer of Mao Zedong, because in the end, Mao just blew it on everything he did. He just blew it. And he blew it to the extent that he caused one of the greatest famines, the greatest famine in all of human history. 65 million people, give or take, tens of millions. So what is it that Xi Jinping thinks he can do that would be better than what Mao did by making all of these decisions that he's going to do this and he's going to do that? Now, as we look back on Xi Jinping's activities and his thinking and his directing of forces, of economies and whatnot over the past couple decades, we see some spectacular screw ups. And one of them is the real estate bubble that the CCP allowed to blow up and which essentially cost the average citizen that was 70% of their savings was in real estate that all of a sudden is worth nothing. So it doesn't take much to look and see these spectacular screw ups that a free economy would never make because people would get caught in these things really quickly and they'd go away. But in a centralized economy, and you know what happened when Chairman Mao directed that his farmers must produce X amount of bushels of grain every year. They
Yeah.
they went out and they did what they could, but they couldn't live up to what Mao asked for, so they lied and they reported all these fake grain
Well,
things.
the farmer did not lie, but it's the
The
local official.
the local
They,
official, right?
yeah, they lie, and then once they lie, then because the land belong to the government, you have a harvest, and you make tons and tons of grain. Then you have to
Pay the
pay to the
taxes on that.
government,
Yes.
right? Yeah, and then that's how the local officials going after one family after another, one household after another to collect even the food they save for themselves. So the whole year of food gone, and then that's why later they all die in the famine.
So let's look at how Mao directed that China would grow at 5% per year. and every local community within China would be responsible for growing 5% per year. So how the heck do you do that? You borrow a lot of money and build stuff.
Well, this is the concept that the Americans or the people living in the capitalist world they don't understand. See, China, see, we don't have that kind of a system. See, we grow our GDP grow wherever as we have a statistic. We calculate whatever the rate of growth of the GDP by the end of the year. Maybe you can make a projection, you can forecast based on quarter by quarter. You can make a forecast maybe next year, you know, and then that's the best that you can do. But wherever come up, it's wherever come up. But in China, their GDP growth is totally different. Their GDP growth is first of all defined by the government. The government say next year we are going to grow 5% or maybe
5%.
4%, whatever. And then the next thing is once they got a 5% goal, it's set because it's a central plan economy. So you have to accomplish that. So what they do is they will have all different provinces. China have 32 provincial administrative region. So the next thing is they're going to have all these provincial government of officials come in, sit down, and they will divide the goal to every province. Say, for you, if you are the mayor of Shanghai, Shanghai, it's a very economically developed area, so maybe they will assign you like 7%. Or if you go coming from a very remote area, maybe from the northern western part of China, all the production there is just the sheeps and cows, so something they will assign you like a 2 or 3% or whatever. Basically, they will find a way to divide the 5% total goal of the GDP growth to different province.
And if you are a provincial governor or whatever,
Yeah,
you
you
must
have the
find a
assigned
way.
goal.
Yeah.
You get a goal that you have to accomplish, right? Otherwise, the next thing is you they will remove you if you don't finish that.
So you're like the provincial
Like a
administrator
governor of the
of these farm districts that had to produce X number of bushels. And if you don't produce them, you have to produce them on paper.
Well, not the paper. There are all different ways of they're doing that, right? It's a very hard to produce them on paper because the economy thing, economic growth, it's very hard, because once you make the number, the next year, say you say this year
5%
you're
more. Yeah.
yeah, next year they will be based on this year's number. You got another
Right.
5% more. So eventually you can't make it, right? So what they do is they will do whatever the way possible. That's why they build all these ghost town, ghost
That's where the
city.
ghost towns come from.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So and then it doesn't have to be ghost town, right? It could be something
Maybe a bridge made out of pure gold or something like
right,
that.
right. Or maybe, remember there was a story of last year they're selling the green material. Basically, they go dig out all the mud from a reservoir, and then they will sell them to as a green material. It's for the green industry, and then they will price them like a skyrocketing price. That's a GDP, right?
Right, right.
So remember
So,
that. So all, they'll find all these different government officials. They will just find their own way, a very maybe very creative way that to make that number work.
but you have to make the number.
That's right.
You
That's
have to
how
make
the China's GDP all these years have been. It's just like they assign you the GDP and then you have to You have to finish it. You don't
And
finish,
one of
and
the easiest ways to do it is to build stuff,
that's right.
whether you
That's
need them or not.
Yep,
If you
yep. You
build
build the
a
bridges, you build the roads, and you build
whatever, doesn't matter.
whatever. Doesn't matter. That's the easiest way. Yes.
So what we saw looking back to Mao's Great Leap Forward were some incredibly silly decisions that Mao and his people made to make this great leap forward from a primitive agriculture based society to a modern world. And the consequences of that was the Great Famine, and the consequences of the Great Famine was the Great Cultural Revolution. And
Well,
that,
yes. Yeah, well, that's complicated, right? Because after
yes,
the
it's
Great
complicated.
Famine took place, then Mao, for a period of time, he lost his power, right?
Yeah.
Because he has to be responsible. But then, then he, in order to get all his power back, that's how he started the Cultural Revolution.
And so, what was the Cultural Revolution other than the stripping of China of all its cultural heritage?
Well, it stripped all the traditional culture, and then it ideologically, if you look at today's China, that's the continuous result of the Cultural Revolution. Xi Jinping belongs to the generation who grew up in the era that without traditional culture and value, everything he knew, he learned when he grew up was communism. So that's why even by today, after the Western world, after we helped China build so many industries, and then we try to help them build their own market economy, and he still want to go back. See,
He will go back because he
and
has
he is
to.
on his way going back, and it's just because that's all he know, and that's all he learned, right? Uh,
One of the interesting things about the stripping of China's cultural heritage is that all of the past was wiped out.
that's
And
right.
and today the CCP is trying to encourage domestic tourism. They want people to go look at things. But all of the things that were worth looking at in terms of traditional China have been wiped out. And
Yeah.
so the only thing left are plastic mountains to look at.
They build things like old palace
Yeah,
or
the plastic, right?
well, it could be built with concrete, right? But it
Yeah,
doesn't matter. It's just
it's a facade representing something that once was.
yeah, and then the purpose is just making money for tourism, right?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
just they want the money, not that because they want the culture. So that's what happened. You go to China, you can find those places. They charge you very expensive ticket. That's all it is. But
And they're
they
like Disneylands, right?
right, right.
Disneylands for tourism, but there's the everything that you want to see was wiped out by the Cultural Revolution,
Yep.
and that was a decision from Mao, and of course Jiang Qing, and so
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
But and to see Xi Jinping wanting to go back to that, it just stumps me. Like I don't understand what he's thinking.
Well, that's
Other than
well, he has been talking about that ever since Uh,
yeah,
he he became the leader of CCP at the end of 2012, right? Remember the first thing he inherited the top leadership of CCP. The first thing came out from him was do not use the second 30 years of economic success, which is start from the early 80s, to uh, to deny the success of the 30 years. That's the Mao era. That's what he's talking about. And when he started talking about that, everybody think that he was joking. He was just playing the words. But then in 2013, the second year after he became the leader of CCP, he basically took the entire communist leadership, all the Politburo, all the leaders in the Politburo to go to the memorial, uh, uh, the Chairman Mao's memorial on Tiananmen Square, right? And then he was talking about something like you cannot ask the older generation to accomplish the what can be done by the later generation. So basically, he was indicating that he want to accomplish the whatever left by Chairman Mao, whatever the Mao wasn't able to accomplish. And ever since then, we see every step he's moving, it's moving back to Chairman Mao's way. So he's he has been, go basically on the way going back to the fundamentalist communism. Every step in the past, 14 years?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that's what it
And
is.
every step of Mao's journey was one revolution after the next, one rectification campaign after the next, one always on revolution, always struggle, always fighting.
See, that's why, remember last year when we talk about the what was the name of the military general that been taken down?
Zhang Youxia,
Zhang Youxia, yes. I always said, what Xi Jinping's facing, it's the all different age of communist officials that climb up their power ladder in the market economy background. So all these people, seen by Xi Jinping's eyes,
loving the good
all
life.
they all corrupted in certain extent, and then he want to correct all corruption, caused by the capitalist ideology. That's what he's been doing.
And if you look at Mao's later years, I don't think he made a single decision that made a bit of sense. It all led China to the period of great perdition, and it was just terrible. But this is just what we think because we're allowed to think here in the United States. If you're in China, no thinking allowed. And if they'll catch you thinking on social media, they'll take you down and take you away. So this has been China Now, 200 and what, 92nd edition. Don Su, thank you very much. Always enjoy talking with you. And China Now, friend or foe, war or peace. See you next week.